Firstly, the speaker said to the listeners that when they got their test, write their name at the top in the capitals letter before they did anything else. Then reading the direction carefully before they answer the question, and make sure they mark their answer on the answer sheet. After that, if they didn't have pencil, let the speaker know. Finally, when they had finished turning their test and went home. Firstly, the speaker said to the listeners that they were pleased to present Mrs. Shu Kim playing violin concerto. The concert that evening would be preceded by a brief talk by Professor Robert Simon on the history of the violin. Mr. Simon has lectured on the violin all around the world. Next, following the performance, they would all go to the lobby to enjoy refreshments. Finally, there is their director, who could introduce Professor Simon. Firstly, the speaker said to the listeners that signing at the desk and get a visitor's pass when entering the building. He reminded that not lose that pass because they would need to wear it at all times when they were in the building. Then waiting for an escort to accompany them to their destination. They must also be escorted back to the reception desk. Finally, he reminded that not forget to sign out and return their pass when leaving. Firstly, the speaker said to the listeners that the store would close in 15 minutes and took all their purchase to the cashier now. Next, he said that if they were buying 5 or few items and were paying with cash, they would use the express checkout lane. We remind that having your receipt ready to show the guard when leaving the store. Finally, we remind that check to make sure all their items were the right size and color before they paid, as they not accept returns. Firstly, the speaker said to the listeners that coming up after the news is their weekend weather report. Then he said that reporter Tom Terrell would interview Susan Gilbert about her new book, How to Get Rich in the Stock Market. Missy Gilbert was a renowned expert on investing and finance, and wrote the weekly newspaper column You and Your Money. That should be a very informative show. Finally, he said, Peter cooked with news. Firstly, the speaker said to the listeners that there should be a large turnout for Wednesday afternoon's National Day Parade. It would be preceded by speeches by the Major and the Chief of Police. Then he said everyone was invited to enjoy a barbecue and fireworks at City Park in the evening. Those were free events. Finally, he reminded that not forget to attend the morning soccer game at National Stadium. Attendance at the game was also free, but arrive early if they wanted to be sure of getting a good seat. Firstly, the speaker said to the listeners that a few changes had been made to their conference schedule. Because of the scheduling conflict, Professor Jameson could speak immediately following lunch instead of before. Then he said that morning coffee could be served in the front or instead of the dining room. The morning workshops could begin at 10 o'clock, as originally scheduled, but the afternoon sessions won't begin until 1:30. Finally, he said, Missy Carter could give an opening talk. Firstly, the speaker said to the listeners that the, the president had left that day for a visit to Latin America. Then President could head first to a meeting in Mexico City with leaders from Colombia, Brazil, and Mexico. Following a few days of rest at a Mexican beach resort, the president could go on to the meetings with heads of state in Peru and Ecuador. Finally, he said the president could tour factories and met with iron leaders in both countries. Firstly, the speaker said to the listeners that they could register for class by phone and avoid the long line at the registration office. Then just call a telephone number. Press 1 if they were a new student, or press 2 if they were a returning student. Enter their social security number, then the class number. After they had selected all their classes, enter their credit card numbers. Finally, he said they could receive a receipt by mail within 5 days.